Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and I'm coming to you from Channel 23, Woodstock Educational Television. And the name of this program is Let's Live. And we have a lovely guest this evening. And would you start off by telling us your name? Introduce yourself.
I certainly will. So my name is Mari Griffin. Do you want me to continue?
Yes. We want to know why you're here.
A little bit about myself, okay. Well, I'm here primarily, I think, to talk about my practice in meditation, in mindfulness meditation, and I teach it. I also work in human rights in the city. I work for Amnesty International. So that's part-time, and then the rest of my week I'm involved with meditation. And I moved up to this area. I live in Hurley. I moved here last year. I'm completely delighted to be here. I moved up from New Jersey, where I was for 20 years. But I grew up actually in Ireland, in Dublin. And so my path here has been a winding one. I went from Dublin to London, where I went to university. I went from there to Egypt, where I lived for 4 years. And then I came to the States 20 years ago.
And how did you discover meditation?
Yeah, I had really always been interested in it. Even as a young teenager in Ireland, I was interested in yoga, I was interested in Eastern belief. So I was reading books, and it just made a lot of sense to me. I was brought up as Roman Catholic, Irish, and something wasn't working. Something wasn't working there for me. I just wasn't finding the answers that I was longing for. And then many years went by. I was practicing yoga for years, really my entire life. And then my mom died in 1998, this time of year, actually, December 19th. And the first year, her first anniversary in 1999, I was looking for a way to mark the occasion and wasn't quite sure what to do. And came across, there was a Zen center in New York City that was offering a morning of instruction and meditation, and that just appealed to me. The idea of just sitting in silence felt right. So I went along and sat with them and liked it. And then I suppose over the next year and a half or so, I was trying different centers, different meditation centers. And then eventually I landed back in Zen through a friend, Still Mind Zendo, which is in Chelsea, and met the teacher there who I liked. She's a woman, and I really connected with her and the Sangha, the community there. So that's really when I committed, and I just started going regularly, doing then full day sits, and then weekends, and then weeks. And attended there every week and met with her as well once a week. So that was really, I think, invaluable to get that one-on-one teaching, having somebody who's on the path and who's wise and who's really been devoted so much of her life to this practice. So I feel very fortunate to have been guided by her as I established this practice. And
at the time, the story that you've been telling seems like it's kind of centered in New York City.
Yes.
But you were living in New Jersey at that time?
Yes, I lived in New Jersey, but I was working in the city, so I've always had that connection.
So where did you decide, at what point did you decide to take your meditation to Hurley?
Yeah, that's another winding road. So I stayed practicing with Still Mind Zendo for over 10 years. And at a certain point, people, friends, neighbors were asking me about meditation, people who were curious, and would I teach them? And I didn't really feel equipped. I was a practitioner, but I didn't know how to teach. I felt if I'm going to teach other people, I really need to know how to do that. So I discovered a teacher training program also in New York City, which was with the Interdependence Project. So they were running this year-long program of training. So I did that, and I think my intention at the time was twofold. One was to learn how to teach, just as it was coming up for me. I wasn't really looking to do that. And the other was to just broaden my focus a little bit. You know, I had been very Zen, and I was curious about other schools, other lineages, other schools of thought. And so I felt that by learning to teach, this is also giving me a framework to learn myself, you know, to read more widely, to connect with other people. So I did that, and then I heard about the program that's run out of University of Massachusetts Medical Center, their Center for Mindfulness. And this is something that was set up by John Kabat-Zinn. I mean, it must be almost 40 years ago. You're smiling, so I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
And, you know, as I'm sure you know, then he set it up at the medical center to just bring these practices to ordinary people who are in pain of one kind or another. So I was curious about this because what I was feeling drawn to do was really to open the door for people. You know, to open the door for people who might not go to a Zen center or something, or another, you know, meditation center, but who are curious and who might benefit, you know, from these practices. So I took the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction course. I took that myself, MBSR. It's an 8-week program. And then I applied to do the teacher training for that. So then I dived into that, did the training up in Massachusetts. So I schlepped from New Jersey to Massachusetts regularly for quite a while. And then the one part of the training is an 8-day retreat. So it's practice and learning. And I saw that they were offering this in Ireland. So this was a really nice opportunity for me to be in Ireland, to do this part of the training, and it was really fabulous. There were people, we were a group of about 85 people from all over the world, all over Europe, Hong Kong, China, Latin America, the US, holed up together in a hotel for over a week. And that felt like some kind of closing of a circle for me, having left Ireland, to come back and be doing this training with these people, you know, with an international Sangha. There was something that felt very moving, actually, to me about that. So I haven't forgotten your question. I know I've deviated a little bit, but it is a path. So once I was trained in that, I started teaching in New Jersey. I was offering, you know, introduction to mindfulness classes. I didn't do the full MBSR program because it's an 8-week program. It's usually 3 hours a week, and then there's a full day at about week 6. And that's a huge time commitment for a lot of people. So I decided to offer something very similar, but reduced hours. So I made it 6 weeks at an hour and a half a session, and that then seemed to work quite well. So I was offering classes in New Jersey, and then also in my workplace. You know, I work in human rights, so we have an office across the street from the United Nations on First Avenue. So I just started a very informal group at lunchtime once a week for my colleagues, and then the building we have an office in has other non-profits, so other people started coming along, and then some staff from the UN came, and a few diplomats came sometimes. So it became a very interesting space, and interesting for me because it had been a little seed that had been in my mind for quite a while, that I really felt that population, these people working in this area, you know, in international human rights, on justice issues, that to bring this sort of practice there felt important. And I felt, well, I can do it because I'm already there and I now have the skills to offer that. So that group has actually continued. It's changed form a little bit because of COVID. But I now do it on Zoom, which has actually meant the colleagues now in Europe can join. So now I have people in Madrid and in Berlin and in London who join. So it's specifically for people working in human rights, and it's a really special group. I really enjoy that. I have another group as well that went from real life to Zoom. That was a New Jersey group, and we now meet on Zoom on Tuesday evenings. So I haven't, you know, I was hoping when I moved to Hurley that I'd connect with like-minded people in this part of the state. Of course, then COVID came, so that put the brakes on that a little bit. But I'd love to, you know, once we can move freely again, you know, connect with people, and if there's an opportunity or a need or a space, you know, to offer this kind of teaching, I'd be very delighted to do it. So that's my very long answer to your question.
So when you say space, you're looking for a physical space.
Yeah. You know, I've done it in New Jersey. I'd rent a space in a yoga studio usually, and then run the classes there. So, you know, that might be something I'll do here. But I've also worked with, you know, in the workplace. So this past year, I worked with a group of about 40 therapists through the Institute for Contemporary Psychotherapy, because they were, with COVID, you know, they were under a lot of pressure themselves because, of course, all of their patients were dealing with the stress of this new situation, but they themselves were also dealing with their own stress around it. So the Institute got in touch with me, and so I ran on Zoom, you know, a 6-week intro to mindfulness for them, and that was really wonderful to work with a group of people who are used to doing inner work, and are obviously very skilled at that, very, you know, emotionally intelligent, but the practice that I'm bringing to them offers another perspective. So I think they appreciated that and seem to get a lot out of it.
That's very interesting. When you said that you were looking for space, I was just thinking this particular area, it's hard to get anything right now.
Really, yeah.
It's hard to get a garage, a yurt, a teepee. It's hard to even get a sofa bed. I mean, it's just we're just coming apart at the seams. There's so many people. So on the one hand, you have all these potential clients, and on the other hand, it's like, where are you going to go? But I'm sure that you won't have any trouble. Have you connected with any of the local Zen groups?
I haven't.
Any Buddhist groups, I'm sorry. I don't know whether they're Zen or not.
A little bit online. You know, there's the Zen Mountain Monastery, which is over near Phoenicia. So I sit with them many mornings. They do a 7 to 8 a.m. hour-long sit, so I try to join that most mornings. And certainly as soon as we can move around again, I'll be visiting in person. Yeah, I'm looking forward, actually. It's really nice.
Oh, so you're doing that on Zoom?
Yeah. They have a whole program that they're running. They do evening sits and, you know, various other events. So they really seem to have adapted, you know, to the moment.
And then, of course, there's up the hill, you know, up Rock City Road, up there to the top of the hill. There's that group, and there are several other groups. So the Buddhists are they're here.
Yes.
And they're going to be very receptive, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And of course, who knows when we're going to get, You know, don't hazard a guess at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And how is your meditation practice melding with your other job?
Yeah.
How is that going?
It's going well. You know, it's interesting that in the UN building itself, when they created that building, they created a meditation room. And I'm forgetting the name of the Secretary General who was there at the time, but it was really important to him that there was a space in the building that was where people could come and be quiet together, could sit in silence. And he recognized the importance of what comes out of silence. You know, that there's a way of knowing that's non-conceptual. And I just thought that, and still think that's a wonderful thing that he created that space. And I've sat in it. It's great. It's a little noisy because visitors come and go, you know, but it's nice to know it's there. And I really started this group in the workplace with the same kind of intention. You know, we need a space where we can be silent together, and where we can, because it's a very heady world. You know, it's a very intellectual world, and I felt like, yeah.
How does that go with the Amnesty group?
Yeah. You know, it's for a lot of them, most of them, I would say, they had never meditated before, you know, and they were just curious. But I think the fact that mindfulness has become such a part of the culture, you know, everybody talks about mindfulness now, so people were curious and they came along and they discovered that there was something deep there. You know, they discovered over time that it was making a difference in their lives. And that's really, you know, what it's about. It's about bringing what comes from these contemplative practices and the profound changes that can occur, and then we can bring them into our lives, into our personal lives, into our work lives. And my feeling is that the more people who are doing that in politics, in human rights, in all of these arenas, the better the world will be. I really believe that we're in a moment of collapse right now. You know, that's a huge shift happening. And that's scary, but it's also got a lot of potential. So I think, I don't know if Socrates said something like, coming to know that you don't know what you thought you knew. And I think there's that sense at the moment that what we thought we knew, is not so sure anymore. You know, everything is uncertain. We're in this not knowing space. We're not knowing about how climate change, the crisis, is going to impact us, really. Things are collapsing, systems are collapsing. So my sense is that more than ever we need wisdom teachings, wisdom communities, and we need what can come out of contemplation and silence and non-conceptual experience with a non-conceptual knowing and connection. So in my work, I think, you know, people report benefits that they also report the benefits that most people report who take on a meditation practice, which is that they feel calmer. You know, the mind is more stable. They feel more able to deal with life's inevitable stresses. They feel an increased appreciation for the little things of life, a sense of gratitude for what we have. People find that it helps them change bad habits into better ones. And so any way that we're working on ourselves to be better at being ourselves also benefits the world. And that's where I think the connection for me is with my work. You know, it's just bringing that approach into the workspace. And people are receptive. I think people feel it, they intuit it, that this is something valuable and helpful.
Well, you said something a couple of minutes ago that made a lot of sense to me. I run across people who are afraid, seriously afraid. And I'm sorry that I cannot offer more support for them, it's hard to bring a person out of fear. They have to do that themselves. But at the same time, when I think about all the collapse that's going on, that we have this new coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm really ready for the new. I'm ready for the better school system. I'm ready for the better transportation system. I'm ready for something that's more planet friendly. I'm ready for all of these things. And I don't know how desperate it's going to have to get before those things happening. Although I feel in my heart that at least in our country, the educational system is now moving forward. I don't know, it can't be anything but good, because I was not really fond of what we had. Mm-hmm. So now I really feel like that there is this possibility. Mm-hmm. And I think healthcare has really moved forward. I think it has taken some giant steps. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm writing a book, and I'm actually backing off and rewriting parts of it, because up until now, when people talked, I'm talking now, the patients now, you know, they went to the doctor, my elbow hurts, my knee hurts, my lung hurt, whatever. But now we're talking in terms of systems, our body's systems. My, my circulatory system is opposed to my heart, and my respiratory system is opposed to my lungs. That's new. And this is a huge step forward. We're going to be thinking about ourselves in a much different way. So wellness is going to be a new thing, you know. So I see that, but you know, when you talk about fear, you really cannot bring a person out of fear.
Yeah, fear is a tough one. In meditation, we obviously, when you're sitting in stillness and silence, stuff comes up. You know, whatever is there is going to rise up to the surface. So emotional stuff comes up inevitably. And in part of the way we approach that through meditation is to allow it to acknowledge it. There's actually a nice acronym that a lot of people use, and I don't know who developed this, so I can't credit them, but the acronym is RAIN, R-A-I-N. And so when you're sitting and a strong emotion comes up, let's say it's fear, you recognize what's happening. You know, just recognize, oh, fear is present, or anxiety is present, or sadness, or whatever it may be. And then I is investigate. But the investigation through meditation is not going into the story around the fear. Like, I'm scared because, this virus is out, or whatever, whatever the narrative is. You actually come and investigate how it's showing up in your body. So what's happening in your body with this emotion? Maybe there's tightness in your chest, maybe there's clamminess in your hands, heat, cold, whatever it might be. And that's where you bring your attention. So you just notice, I have all these expressions, fear is showing up in all kinds of ways in my body. And so, I think I jumped, RAIN is recognize what's there. I think I jumped over A. A is acknowledge it.
Yes.
Just acknowledge its presence. This is what I got right now. I'm in fear, fear is present. And then the I is investigate in this way, what's happening in my body. And then the N is kind of non-identify, like don't collapse into the fear. So you learn to witness it. You're sort of watching your own fear. You're seeing how it's showing up. And then you sit with it with gentleness. So N can also be nurture. Like, what does this part of me that feels fear right now, what does it need to feel better? And sometimes, so you're really just sensing into your own body, just really coming into that body intelligence and that body wisdom and asking it, what does this part of me need right now? And sometimes just the acknowledgement can shift things. Or sometimes you might think, I just need to hold my heart. I just need to put my hand on my heart, or somewhere, just to connect, whatever that may be. So with meditation, with any emotion, we don't push anything away. You know, we're sort of expanding and making space for whatever is there. And really the practice is about developing the skills and the stability to be able to be with whatever is there. You know, and it's easy to be with things when everything is going well, but when things are challenging, can we also create this stable container for ourselves so that we can hold it, whether it's fear or it's anger or it's sadness or loneliness. Can we just sit with it and hold it gently? So, you know, and with the pandemic and all that came with that back in March, I sort of felt like this is what I've been practicing for, you know, this is really showing up for me now, because it's a lot for all of us to handle. And I think more and more as we come to the end of the year, you know, we've had wave after wave of, you know, the pandemic, the election, just the stress, just the general stress that's everywhere.
It's a many layered cake.
It's a many layered cake, and there are many waves to this. It's exhausting. So whatever, you know, tools we have, and there are many, you know, there's exercise, there's many, of course, but, you know, for me, like, meditation is my bedrock these days and always.
You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about how, because I'm really sensitive to hunger, so many people don't have food now. And of course, I know from my experience that when there is no food, that's all you can't think about anything else. You can't go with the rain, you can't go with the, you know, you're just, you know, I have no money and I have no food, and I don't know where my next meal, you know, and we have so many people who have never had this experience before, and they're all over our country.
Yeah.
They're all over our country. It's a terrible thing. To be young right now is very challenging.
It's very challenging. Yeah.
It's very challenging, and whenever I go out, you know, like drive down the road, I go to Albany or I go to whatever, and I see all these young women, and I see pregnant women, and I think, oh, honey, how can you do it? I don't know if I could do that now. I don't know if I could. But I guess that you compartmentalize also, you know, you just think about the joy of the loved one and not the fact that it's a big mess out there. You know?
Yeah. And I think also, you know, as we were saying earlier, this moment, this shift, that, you know, there are some openings here, some potential. And my sincere hope is we've been driven by greed for so long, by money, and we see this huge inequality in this country, with people, as you say, more and more people not having enough to eat, and meanwhile you have, you know, the big tech giants with more money than they could ever possibly spend. And I think people are waking up to that too. Like, that just doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't make sense that you have this tiny group of people with all the wealth when everybody else is struggling. So I really hope that we start to shift in our values and see that this is not the way to create a healthy society. You know, the way to create a healthy society is to take care of each other and to take care of our basic needs, or, you know, that everybody should be able to eat. You know, nobody should not have enough.
Right. It's a very challenging thing, and of course, when you're wrapped up into the wealth, and you have the enormous wealth. It's been a long time since I have been around people that were that wealthy, but you know, they're in their own bubble, they're in their own cocoon, and obviously, you know, the one with the most toys wins, and the attitude 100%. And I didn't know thousands of people wealthy like that, but I did know a bunch. Mm-hmm. And the attitude was, well, I should have the money better than he. I mean, it's a total different bubble. And so now one of our challenges is to pierce the bubble.
Yes.
And possibly it's happening now.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
The two that I do know, that I do feel very confident about, are education and healthcare. Just to come around with healthcare would be a huge thing.
Yeah.
And of course the planet's having a temper fit. And she deserves to.
Yes.
She should.
She should. Yeah. Yeah, we deserve it.
And she ought to be able to have her temper fit. So that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So are you telling people about your meditation now? How are you doing this? How are you spreading the word?
I'm not really, to be perfectly honest. I'm, my week is already quite busy because I wear these two hats, and I have two meditation groups that have continued, the workplace one, and then my other New Jersey people. And then I take on, some intro to mindfulness 6 weeks. So I did the therapists, and I also worked with NYU with their Center for International Cooperation. I did a 6-week with them. So it's really, I'm doing whatever has come up rather than actively, being out there seeking. And partly because of this year has been so unusual. It's just, it's been enough to keep going.
Those of us who learn, and there are people who learn, because I, for one, am a learner. I've got to have a class.
Yes.
I've got to have a class.
Yeah.
Are going to find you.
Yeah.
If you can just tell a few people that you're around. Have you gone to any libraries?
Well, I went to join my local Hurley library, and then a week later it was closed.
Yeah.
But I will, that's, on my list, top of my list, because I love libraries and like hanging out in them, and it's such a charming little one there in Hurley as well.
There is a library down the road. It's called the West Hurley Library, and she is a jewel. She's a total jewel. And since you do Zoom, she does Zoom.
Okay.
And she's really good.
Yeah.
And it's fortunate that you chose Hurley. I still haven't answered in my mind how you chose Hurley,
Okay,
but the towns and communities in this area all have libraries.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
And they have beautiful libraries. So you can, share yourself with several of these libraries. The Kingston Library is an old elementary school. It's beautiful. And then there's, you go up to the Hudson. Oh my gosh, the Hudson Library is enormous and so fabulous. And Tannersville, it's a jewel.
Wow.
So there's so many different opportunities for you just to go around and have a class here and a class there and a class somewhere else.
That sounds fantastic, because I love libraries, so I'll look forward to exploring all of those.
I'm extremely partial to libraries.
Yeah.
I have I've written a couple of books, and I have gone to different libraries and given talks, and I'm a Reiki master teacher, so I do that sort of thing, and a reflexologist, and I do that sort of thing. But it's the libraries I'm really drawn to, because they are so wonderful. So you can keep yourself. How did you find Hurley?
So
anyway?
how I found Hurley? Well, Hurley found me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because when I lived in New Jersey, my ex-husband and I, we have 2 children, so we used to come up here hiking, particularly to Minnewaska, and we just loved this area. And then, as my children grew older and then left home, I started coming up with friends. I have friends who live up here in Saugerties and Stone Ridge. So I'd come up and go hiking in the area. And it just always felt like the place I wanted to be. From the very first visit, I would say.
Really?
Yeah. I always felt good when I came up here. I'd drive up the Garden State Parkway and get to 87, and something in me my heart would just expand. I don't know why. It just felt right. So I knew that when my children left, I didn't want. I was living in suburban New Jersey, and it was fine, but it's not where I wanted to stay after that. And there was nowhere else that called me. So I moved out of our old house last year, and then came up here, looked at, I think, 7 houses in one day. The first day I looked. The house I'm in now is the first house. It's in Hurley. And I'd never actually been to Hurley before. I mean, I'd been to Kingston and I'd been to Woodstock and the other surrounding towns, but not Hurley. And this little house was just charmed me, and I put an offer in by the end of the day, and no, I think it was not the end of the day. It was about 2 days later, and that was it. So it just found me, I think, and I'm very happy to be there. It's just so lovely, that lovely main street with the lovely library and those stone houses, and Kingston, I think, is just a fabulous town as well. Enjoy being there. So I honestly couldn't be happier. I'm so delighted to be here.
That's wonderful too, and you did this last year.
Yes.
So you must have just beat the mob.
I just did, and huge thanks for that. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't actively appreciate, how lucky I was that this all just fell into place so well. I think in part this area maybe speaks to me because I grew up in Ireland, in Dublin, so I grew up just outside the city, but both my parents came from the southwest, from farms. So my childhood was every summer of being on my grandparents' farm. So I think that has always felt like my deepest home. Being in nature, that's my deepest home. So this felt like that I could have that kind of experience living here, and I do.
Well, now I'm still going to seek an answer. You decided that you wanted to come up here. What made you go to a real estate agent that would lead you to 7 houses in Hurley?
No, they weren't all in Hurley. The 7, there was only one in Hurley, which is the one I bought. The others were in other, just in the area. I don't think there was anything in Woodstock. But there might have been something in Marbletown. I actually don't remember. There was one near Rosendale. So they were not all in Hurley. There was just this one. But this was the one that stole my heart.
That's fascinating. Because it's just fascinating. I see them coming through, the new people, and you are in that, you kind of a couple of months ahead, or maybe 3 months ahead. And I'm wondering how long they will live here, many of them, before they head back where they came from.
That's a good
Does
question.
that make any sense?
It makes total sense. And I wonder the same thing.
Do you really?
I do, because I think, for me, there was a long time coming. Like, I've known I wanted to do this for years. The time wasn't right. But I think for a lot of the new people who are coming, especially people coming because of COVID, it's a quick decision. It's like, oh, I need to get out of the city, I'll go here. And I wonder, have they really considered what it's like, to live in the countryside and to be away from the city? And I don't know the answer. I don't know if they'll end up going back or not. I can see that for people already here, like like you, it must be a little bit disturbing to see this sudden influx of people. I'm sure it's not what you want.
Well, I came from the DC metro area, and we had lived there for 30 years. And of course, after 9/11, and I feel like you kind of understand this because you did work at the UN, everybody who worked in Washington, D.C., whether through the Pentagon or through whatever, through the military-industrial complex that was there, because there are all these military bases and things around, after 9/11, they began to leave out of fear. And they had been living in these houses for these many years. And of course, there wasn't enough housing in the DC metro area. So they began to put these houses for sale. And I saw them leave, say this is Washington, D.C., you know, with a beltway in a clock. I saw them going out far enough to find a house that was cheaper so that they were away from what they were afraid was going to come back again, but still able to get back to their health care and things like that. And so they went out like this, you know, and I see that kind of happening. I see people who have children have come up here for the schools, and I certainly don't blame them for that, because the schools are free and they're good, and in some of the towns around they are really, really good. And if you're lucky enough to stumble on one of those towns, because the ones that have the really, really good schools are not saying much. And so, you know, that's kind of a secret.
Yeah.
That's kind of a secret. So those people probably will stay longer.
Yeah.
But I met a young man recently who had always worked in the city, and he, of course, as with a lot of the other people who left the city, had managed to accrue some kind of value in an apartment. So that he was given some money to move out, and he moved out. But he didn't have a car, and he came up here, and he didn't get a car. And so he did get a job, and then of course immediately lost the job because of COVID. So here he was, unemployed, without decent, you know, and homeless, you know. And this is not a person. You know, and I'm sure because he's homeless, he's being discriminated in all the ways that homeless people generally are. And that's not him.
Yeah.
You know, he's in that situation, but it's not him.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing these different things happening, and I'm wondering, how long are you going to stay in this situation before you just pack up and go back home?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, can you pack up and go back?
Yeah. And the other aspect of this is people working from home. So, for example, before COVID, I still had to show up at my office 3 days a week. So my life before this was crazy. You know, I was staying 1 or 2 nights down there. It just seemed to me like I was always on the road. I was always packing my bag to be somewhere. So for me, you know, there was a huge benefit. I wish it hadn't come at such a cost to so many other people, but just being able to work from home has changed my life, you know, for the better. And I suspect that once this passes, we're not going to work in the same way anymore. I don't think I'm going back to 3 days a week in the office, maybe 1, because we can see now that we can do this from home. So that's a huge shift. And I think a lot of people would not have been able to move out of New York City or Brooklyn or wherever to move up here because of the commute, because they just couldn't make that work. But if the way we work is changing, that changes that element as well.
So our educational system has changed, our healthcare system has changed, our employment system has changed. Hopefully, our appreciation of the planet has changed.
Yes.
If people don't go to work so much,
Yeah.
that's an exciting thing.
It's an exciting thing. We're not using as much fuel. I feel like it's allowed me to live more in alignment with my values. I'm not using as much fuel, very minimally, and I can support local business. I can grow my own food, some of it at least. It's really a game changer. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves.
Because a commute takes so much energy.
Yes.
And unless you are the type of person that will sit down on the bus or train and use that time,
Yeah, time just spent.
I went down once a week for several years. I was studying writing at Gotham. So I'd go down on the bus, and then I'd take the class, and then I'd come back at night. And there was a group of people every time I got on the bus at night that if you made a peep, they threatened to kill you. I mean, that was just, they didn't say that, but that's really what it was all about. And after a few trips, I loved them.
Mm.
It was like, we're going to get rid of you.
These are the rules.
But that was the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And now, I think maybe 5 people get on the bus, I guess. I don't know.
I don't
There's
know.
no cars there.
I never see buses or cars.
Oh, God, I used to fight for parking places.
Really?
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Oh. And so now we don't have to worry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. I'm sorry for the bus company.
Yes. Yeah, there's two sides. The benefit, somebody also suffers for this, but big picture, I think it's pretty huge in the way that we live and work.
So when you were working for the nonprofit, how did they come to the decision about who was going to get to stay home and not? How did that come about?
Yeah, it came about very suddenly. So my office is quite a small office because the piece of the work that we do just relates to the UN. So there was 6 of us in the office. And, we closed the office, I think, March 12th or 13th. And it happened very fast. I remember at the beginning of that week, we were saying, well, this is not looking good. There was supposed to be a big meeting, UN meeting, the following week, called the Commission on the Status of Women. People from all over the world come to that meeting every year. So our building is crowded, the streets are crowded. And we were thinking, well, this could be not safe, so how about you only come in next week if you have to attend those meetings. And then within a day, the following day we were saying, well, maybe we should close the office. It was remarkable, like in just 2 or 3 days, we went from not really thinking we would ever have to close the office to, I think we have to close the office. So we did it quite quickly. We just thought, other organizations were doing the same thing. The UN was talking about doing the same thing. So we said, well, let's just at least close for a couple of weeks. That meeting was cancelled. Nobody came in the end. So we just went into lockdown very, very quickly, and we haven't been back. The building is open. I have been there a couple of times. Nobody else is working in it, so the only people I see is the door guy. And everybody's just still waiting. So we've been working from home, full time since the middle of March. And for the foreseeable future, it looks like.
That's fabulous. And this is happening everywhere.
This is happening everywhere, and now we're discussing, do we have 2 office spaces? Do we need to? Going into the future, are we ever going to be back where 6 of us will be there full time? I don't think so. So now we're thinking about letting go one of the offices and just, adapting one space to make it work for us. So I suspect next year, people will be going in 1, 2, 3 times a week and then working from home the rest of the time. And I'm sure we're not alone in that. I think that's going to be the case for a lot of companies and organizations. So, yeah.
So what's happening there is also happening in cities everywhere. Has there been any recognition that the planet is shifting because of this?
I don't know, but it is shifting. Whether, it is shifting. I think we all feel that. I mean, I feel that.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yes.
I think we all just feel like the ground is shifting from underneath our feet.
Absolutely.
And we don't know where things are headed.
Right.
And some of it feels really scary. And some of it feels kind of hopeful and filled with potential.
I'm leaning to the hopeful side.
Me too.
Something.
I'm with you.
I say that I'm so old that fear is not.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but like I was talking earlier, I don't know how I would do if I were young.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes a huge difference. I am, after all, a dinosaur, and so I'm not going to be, 50 years, or 20 years, or whatever. That's just not there.
Yeah.
I'm too old. And so the real change, I don't know how long it's going to take before the real change happens.
Yeah. I think it'll be gradual, possibly. I mean, well, I could be wrong. We've had a very sudden change this year. Like, who could ever have predicted this year and how we're all living? I mean, nobody could have. So who knows?
Right.
Who knows?
Right. There is no prediction.
And I think I have no interest in going back to the old normal, because that wasn't working either.
It was, people were trying, but it wasn't working.
And a lot of people were suffering under that old normal. And so I hope, we can go forward with more compassion and care.
You do meditation, and as a self-employed meditator, have you ever been called to write a plan, a business plan? You have. You're nodding.
Something that I'm not very good at, business plans. I feel it's something I should be doing instead of, what I'm doing now, which is a little bit more ad hoc. But yeah, I think it would make sense for me to do that.
How can you write a business plan in this market?
Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah, my attitude with this kind of work, and really with my life, I suppose in general, is to live in the moment, to do what needs to be done today, and to be fully committed to it, and to do it to the best of my ability, and hope that in doing that I'm building the future that needs to unfold. So I really live my life with a lot of trust, I think, that if I pay attention, if I live in the moment, if I pay attention and take care of things, that the future will take care of itself. It will unfold as it needs to.
Is this a philosophy of the type of meditation that you teach?
No, I think this is just mine.
It's just yours.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's certainly compatible with meditation. I think it's completely compatible with it. That, we spend so much time often just living from the neck up, in our heads. And often what's happening in our heads is that we're thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future instead of just being in the present. So meditation is really about being fully present, very fully awake in the present, which doesn't mean you don't think about the future, you don't think about the past, but just, not being caught up in just mindlessness, just just being more awake, more present.
You know, that's very interesting, because one of the things that I've observed about women in the last 40 years or so, we're down to 5 minutes,
Okay.
is that a lot of women, and I am saying this because I have never seen men to do this. But a lot of women will spend so much time, if they're trying to get a career off the ground, or a job, or if they're trying to create a business, they will spend so much time in the planning stage, in the future, that they are never going to get that future pulled into the now. I've never seen a man do that, but I have seen a lot of women. So we are down here to the last couple of minutes. What is something important that we can say about your career now and what you have to offer?
You know, I think, like a lot of people, I think about what is needed of me right now. You know, what is the future calling, demanding of us? If we want to live in the kind of future that we want to see, where, for me and you, I think, we want more compassion, more kindness in the world, what can I do to serve that? And really that's the question I live with, you know. What can I do with my particular background, my particular experience, my particular skills? How can I help make a difference in some small way? And that's the road I follow.
And so if someone is watching this program and thinks that they would like to contact you about meditation, how do they get in touch with you?
Very easily. I think the easiest way, I have a website. It's my name, so it's marigriffin.com, MARIGRIFFIN.com. So there they'll find, you know, info about me, info about classes, anything that's coming up. My email is in there as well. And I am planning over the holidays, I hope, to upload some guided meditations there, so that people can just come in and get a 5-minute meditation or a 10-minute meditation, just as a way of, you know, supporting that.
How wonderful. Do you see yourself marketing a series of meditations?
Possibly. I certainly would like, you know, the next step, and my son, who's a bit more technologically advanced than I am, is going to give me some help with this. But, you know, find a platform, I don't know what that would be, whether it's Bandcamp or something, where I can upload some guided meditations. And then, you know, I could do some for working with emotions, for example, or working with physical pain, working with sleep issues. So that's really my next step, my intention for my next step in this path.
So, as a mindfulness person, can you offer a series of sessions for someone who is having trouble sleeping?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you offer a series for someone who's dieting?
You know, all of these things can be addressed really in the 6-week program that I run already, because each week I take a different theme. So the first week is usually just establishing the basics of how to set up a meditation practice. What is it even? How do you do it? You know, just really get the groundwork done there. And then we'll look at things like working with emotions, working with physical pain, working with sleeplessness, working with anxiety. Just a cautionary note maybe is that the one thing I ask people to take care of, you know, if somebody has trauma in their background, you know, meditation can be a trigger because you are sitting with yourself. And so if there's trauma, stuff can come up. So I'm always very careful and to have a conversation with people beforehand to make sure that they're safe. Because if you have a lot of trauma, just going into silence and into stillness can be challenging and may not be that helpful. You know, it needs some different kind of attention. So that's my one caveat, I think. You know, for most people, this is a very helpful practice. But
we're down to 1 minute.
We're down to a minute.
Can you tell us again how to get in touch with you?
Yes, I can. It's marigriffin.com. So MariGriffin.com. And that has my email address and lots of other information.
Well, I'm very excited about the guided meditations. And I'm excited about the idea of having a series of 6 meditation sessions. And I want to thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, it's good night time. Thank you so much for coming, Mari, and I'll hope to see you again.
Me too. Thank you. Good night.